sort of land the plane over. We've discussed some of these key economic aspects and monetary aspects, but what does this actually mean? So with that, I guess we'll hand it to Josh to give us a brief dissection of the political landscape in the US and potentially a back and forth conversation of how this impacts the market.
Absolutely. So thank you for that, Cam. You say shenanigans. I was thinking more hijinks is maybe a more fun word we can use, I guess, to kind of bring the mood up on this a little bit, because what you've been hearing from me in particular for this year so far is that this is the year of global elections. And well, we're more than halfway through the year. We've seen a lot of them already. And there's been 35 elections so far in the major sort of democratic nations in the world. More than 2.3 million ballots have been counted. There's basically been more voters than ever who will have voted at the end of this year in at least 64 countries, plus the EU. So it's been a very momentous year in those types of ways. And maybe in some sort of dramatic fashion, we're going to end it with the one in the United States, maybe the most consequential, well, definitely the most consequential sort of economy in the whole equation. We did start the year with, for example, just to give everybody a brief refresher, Taiwan's pro-independence party victory in January. We went on to see very predictable results in places like Russia. Slightly surprising in India, as Modi didn't win by as strongly as many thought he would. And more recently in France, the left-wing coalition coming out on top. Now, with a few left to go, obviously, the elephant in the room is the United States. You guys thought you could get away from talking about it in this webinar. Well, not this one. So it's going to be everywhere for a couple of months. Now, talking about where things stand in there, not to get too deep in the weeds on this particular aspect, well, the polls continue to favor the Republican candidate and Trump, and there's a lot of big recent news where we've had to kind of rewrite some of my notes on this, given how events have been overtaking. But basically, what remains the same is that it seems likelier at this point in time that we'll see that come to pass. Now, recent events haven't really given him a huge boon, so there's still the same sort of polarization that you'd come to expect. On the other side of the equation, for now, as of this time, President Biden still seems likely to be running again. But essentially, we probably know all that already. So what does all of that mean? So for that, I would go over to the next slide, just talk about what we could expect from those different aspects. Now, some of this is probably pretty straightforward, but essentially, right now, the most likely outcome is that the GOP sweeps at a 45% chance, as you can see on here. Now, that being the case, that wouldn't look great for Chinese exports and imports, obviously, because well,
so Josh, let's back up for just 1 second.
Sure.
By sweep, we've talked about the Republicans potentially winning the White House. But
and that right, correct.
What do you mean by sweep?
So I mean they get out a broom. No, I'm just kidding. So they would have control of the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate in this case. So that's what that would mean. Wouldn't be good news for Chinese exports or imports. Well, Trump has been traditionally pretty vocal about his opposition to those types of aspects. One of the aspects that Biden and his team have been well known for is the grid technology with green energy and such. Not so much with the conservatives who tend to favor the use of fossil fuels. So we'd expect those different aspects to trend in a more bearish direction for electrics. Fossil fuels would be something people would be more bullish on if this sweep were to happen. And aside from that, Medicaid providers, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Brian. I was a bit surprised, to be honest, to see very bearish on the GOP sweep. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
Absolutely. When it comes to Medicaid providers, it's not to say that essentially they're going to close them down and not give them their benefits. The Republicans will probably just cut their abilities of being as profitable as they might be. So it means that we want to shy away from those types of areas because they'll come in and they'll say, this is the total cost that you'll receive at the end of the day. Now, in my mind, how we're looking at the portfolio overall, when we're talking about a potential sweep and it's 45%, we're not going to make a gamble on saying, hey, the Republicans are going to get one side, or there's a 10% chance that the Democrats are going to get a sweep. I'm mostly concentrating on those areas that are bullish across the board, whether we have a Republican or a Democratic president, and whether we have a Republican or a Democratic Congress and Senate. So you can see those most important areas are near the bottom. Semiconductors, let's call it infrastructure with road and bridge repair, and aerospace and defense. Now, the spending in aerospace and defense has been astronomical. I can't remember, I think it's 18 of the NATO members have now gotten up to 2%. And essentially, that means that the number of orders has significantly increased. For some reason, aerospace and defense stocks have not performed as well as the S&P 500. I don't think that's going to change because we have a few names in there that are having a lot of trouble. And some other powers that be are essentially questioning whether the government contracts are accretive towards companies doing well by the government, but also being profitable for themselves. So we haven't been investing over there, but the amount of spending that will go to that area will continue to increase. We'll continue to evaluate that segment. I don't see changing my position unless they change their ways. That being said, when it comes to the semiconductor build out, we have talked significantly about the push on the grid. That is where the spending is coming from. And it doesn't matter which side wins. That's going to continue to be the case because we need it across America. The amount of energy use has been significant, and those semiconductors are essentially the main benefactors there. So I really want to concentrate in those types of areas, and I really want to avoid areas like electric cars where it's either very bullish or very bearish. Then we would be taking a concerted effort into a place. I don't want to sit there and worry about things too much in those types of ways because this is going to be a little bit of a flip in the election, as we saw on the last slide. It's being based on 7 states. So don't count on Florida. Well, this time it's not Florida, but don't count on one state saving the election for you. And that's why we want to be looking at what segments potentially going to do well.
I think it's been a while since Florida's been one of the true swing states, though, hasn't it?
Well, last election was still significant, but I don't think COVID was good for their demographics with more right-wing leaning people moving down from the Northeast to Florida and swinging it further towards the right.